The congressional hearing room was still as stone. Every conversation, every shuffle of paper faded into silence as Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett rose from her seat and approached the microphone. A thick envelope of documents rested firmly in her hand. Across the long, polished table sat Pam Bondi, former Attorney General of Florida. Her expression was calm, too calm. The overhead lights glinted off her pearl necklace as she straightened in the witness chair, projecting the same confidence that had carried her through years of televised defenses and political brawls. For weeks she had promised a revelation, a moment that would shake Washington to its core. Today was supposed to be that day. But Jasmine Crockett had other plans. Crockett adjusted the microphone, her voice steady yet sharp enough to slice through the tension. "Ms. Bondi, before we proceed," she began, "I'd like to share something that arrived in my office just this morning." The faint crinkle of the sealed envelope echoed in the chamber. Cameras zoomed in. Bondi's polished smile faltered, barely, but enough for every reporter in the room to notice. No one knew what the envelope contained, but in 15 minutes, Pam Bondi's career would fracture under the weight of its contents, and Jasmine Crockett would ascend from freshman congresswoman to national symbol of accountability. The morning had begun with the kind of buzz that surrounds a political spectacle. Every major network had cameras stationed along the back wall. Spectators filled the gallery. Bondi had entered the room radiating self-assurance, surrounded by aides and friendly lawmakers. Her navy blazer was crisp, her golden hair immaculate, her tone when greeting the committee members almost regal. "Miss Bondi comes before us with serious allegations that transcend partisanship," announced the Republican chair, hammering the gavel. "Her service to this nation commands our respect." Bondi smiled modestly, exactly as she had rehearsed. But at the far end of the dais, Jasmine Crockett sat quietly, pen in hand, eyes unblinking. She had spent 3 nights poring over documents, cross-checking every claim Bondi had made on television, tracing funding, communications, and digital fingerprints. 3 nights earlier, an anonymous email had landed in her inbox with the subject line, "What she isn't telling Congress." Inside were attachments, contracts, internal memos, and metadata. If verified, they would destroy Bondi's credibility completely. Crockett had them verified twice, then a third time. When the chairman finished his introduction, Crockett exchanged a subtle glance with her counsel. A quiet nod confirmed it. The documents were airtight. Bondi began her testimony with polished precision. "I appear before you today not as a partisan," she said, "but as a citizen who has uncovered troubling patterns of misconduct. I take no pleasure in revealing what I've found, but the integrity of our democracy demands it." Her voice was smooth, confident, each line designed for the evening news. Republican members nodded approvingly. Reporters typed feverishly. But Jasmine Crockett waited, patient, silent, ready. When her turn finally came, the chairman's voice cut through the applause. "The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Crockett, for 5 minutes of questioning." Crockett stood. Her movements were deliberate, her posture precise. She adjusted her notes, aligned the papers in front of her, and began. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Bondi, I'd like to begin by acknowledging your years of public service. As a fellow attorney, I respect anyone who's dedicated themselves to the law." Bondi inclined her head slightly. "Thank you, Congresswoman. You've testified that your concerns today are nonpartisan, motivated purely by evidence. Is that correct?" "Absolutely," Bondi replied smoothly. "This isn't about politics. It's about truth." "And you have no financial interest in the outcome of these proceedings?" "None whatsoever," she said, her tone resolute. Crockett nodded slowly, letting the silence hang. Then she placed a single sheet on the table between them. "Ms. Bondi, this document is a contract dated 3 months ago, between you and the America First Legal Foundation. It states you were paid $400,000 to develop and promote legal narratives regarding governmental overreach and election integrity. Do you deny signing this contract?" The air left the room. Every camera swiveled toward Bondi. Her fingers tightened around her pen. "That's a consulting arrangement," she said quickly. It doesn't influence my testimony. Yet you didn't disclose it in your sworn statement, Crockett replied evenly. Why not? Bondi hesitated. It wasn't relevant. It's directly relevant, Crockett cut in. Because it goes to motive. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Now, Crockett continued, let's discuss one of the documents you submitted, the so-called Wells Memorandum. According to your filing, it was authored by a Harrison Wells, an election law expert. Are you personally acquainted with Mr. Wells? Bondi blinked. I don't believe so. My team received that document through our research channels. Crockett lifted another paper. That's interesting, because there is no record of a Harrison Wells with the credentials you've listed. The phone number in the memo is disconnected. The email bounces. Mr. Wells doesn't exist. Gasps echoed around the room. Bondi shifted uncomfortably. Congresswoman, if there's a clerical error— This isn't clerical, Crockett snapped. This is fabrication. She held up a printout, every word highlighted in yellow. This is the original draft of your memo, retrieved from your assistant's cloud account. Metadata shows it was created 6 weeks ago, authored by Pam Bondi, not Harrison Wells. The silence that followed was deafening. Photographers' shutters clicked. The chairman's face froze. Bondi's perfectly practiced expression fractured. Furthermore, Crockett said, voice rising, the statistics in your report claim that 312% of registered voters in Fulton County cast ballots. Ms. Bondi, that's a mathematical impossibility. Would you care to explain how more than 3 votes were cast per voter? Bondi's mouth opened, but no words came out. And finally, Crockett added, sliding another paper across, you've provided a sworn affidavit from an election supervisor named Maria Gutierrez. Bondi nodded quickly, grateful to move on. Yes, that's one of the key affidavits supporting our claims. Crockett paused. Ms. Bondi, Maria Gutierrez died in 2019. A collective gasp thundered through the hearing room. Bondi blinked rapidly. That must be some mistake. My staff handled the— So you're admitting you didn't verify your evidence before submitting it to Congress under oath? I reviewed the materials. Did you personally verify them, yes or no? Crockett leaned forward. Because submitting falsified evidence to Congress is a federal offense, Ms. Bondi. Title 18, Section 1001. Punishable by up to 5 years in prison. Pandemonium broke out. Reporters sprinted for the exits, phones lighting up as the story exploded across every news feed in real time. Mr. Chairman, Bondi's lawyer shouted, we request a recess. Not yet, Crockett said firmly. I still have 2 minutes remaining. And I haven't even gotten to the emails. Bondi's head jerked up. What emails? Crockett gestured to a staffer who projected a thread of messages onto the screen. These are between you and several political operatives discussing, quote, crafting a narrative compelling enough to force a special investigation, regardless of the underlying facts. The audience erupted. Bondi's face drained of color. Her lawyer whispered urgently, but Crockett's voice sliced through the chaos. These emails were sent from your government account during your time as Attorney General. They were obtained legally under Florida's public records law. The chairman's gavel hammered repeatedly. Order! Order! But the chamber was beyond order. Members huddled, reporters flooded out, cameras flashed. Crockett stood unwavering. Mr. Chairman, I still have time on the clock, and I intend to use it. After a tense pause, the chairman relented. The gentlewoman from Texas may proceed. Crockett turned back to Bondi, her tone quiet but devastating. Ms. Bondi, you presented evidence that appears fabricated, attributed it to a non-existent person, and accepted $400,000 from an organization with a clear political interest. Do you wish to correct your testimony? Bondi swallowed hard. Congresswoman, I dispute your characterization of— Because, Crockett interrupted, we also recovered text messages from your phone. Bondi froze. Need something dramatic for the hearing, Crockett read aloud. Real data doesn't tell the story we need. Making up sources is risky, but Congress never checks. Just make it compelling enough for the news cycle. The timestamp was 2 weeks old. A suffocating silence fell. Even the photographers stopped clicking. "Ms. Bondi," Crockett asked softly, "would you like to revise your testimony about not knowingly submitting false evidence to Congress?" Bondi turned to her attorney, whispering furiously. After a long moment, she faced the microphone. "On advice of counsel," she said, voice shaking, "I invoke my Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination." The chairman's gavel struck like a gunshot. "This hearing is in recess for 1 hour." But it was already over. As Bondi buried her face in her hands, Jasmine Crockett calmly gathered her papers. The flash of cameras bathed the room in white light, capturing the moment Washington would never forget. The hearing room emptied into chaos. Reporters shouted questions, cameras jostled, and congressional aides scrambled to contain the firestorm that had just detonated on live television. Pam Bondi remained slumped in her chair, the color drained from her face, her once immaculate posture reduced to a silhouette of defeat. Her attorney hovered at her side, whispering about damage control, about how they might still spin this. But Jasmine Crockett was already gone. She'd slipped quietly out a side door, documents tucked under her arm, her steps measured and unhurried. The cameras wanted a reaction, but she wasn't giving them one. Not yet. The sound of the gavel still echoed in her ears. Recess for 1 hour. But everyone knew there would be no second half of that hearing. By the time Crockett reached her office, her phone was already vibrating nonstop. Her staff had been tracking every network broadcast. CNN, MSNBC, and even Fox had cut live to the confrontation, each running the same headline in bold red banners: "Pam Bondi caught in false testimony. Crockett unleashes proof." In her office, the atmosphere was electric. Staffers leaned over screens, updating the Congresswoman as statements poured in. "NBC wants you live at 8. Politico's calling it a historic takedown. Legal analysts say Bondi could face federal charges." Crockett didn't respond. She stood at the window, watching the dusk settle over the Capitol dome. "No celebrations," she finally said. "This isn't over." If she was willing to falsify evidence that brazenly, someone else was behind it. Her chief of staff, Devin, frowned. "You think she didn't act alone?" "No one pulls off that kind of fabrication without backup," Crockett replied. "She was a messenger. We need to find the authors." She turned back toward her desk, flipping open the envelope again. Inside, alongside the documents she had presented in the hearing, was a small flash drive. The anonymous source had included it without comment. Just a note that read, "Follow the funding trail." That night, the drive's contents revealed a deeper labyrinth. Email chains, encrypted memos, and draft legal strategies all traced back to one entity: the Republic Legal Initiative, RLI, a shadow organization registered under multiple shell corporations in Delaware and the Cayman Islands. Crockett recognized one of the signatures on the board of trustees. "Mark Eddington," she murmured, "senior advisor to the former president." Devin leaned over her shoulder. "If RLI bankrolled Bondi's false evidence, it's not just perjury. It's conspiracy." "Exactly," Crockett said, standing. "And they're not going to stop just because Bondi got caught. They'll look for someone new." She paused, then added, "Let's make sure that whoever's next knows what happens when they lie under oath." 2 days later, Bondi's resignation letter went public. She cited personal reasons and a desire to protect her family from media intrusion. But her credibility was gone, and her law license was under review by the Florida bar. Meanwhile, the Justice Department announced a preliminary inquiry into whether her testimony had violated federal statutes. Still, Crockett couldn't shake the feeling that the explosion in the hearing room had only been a spark. The machine behind Bondi was still moving. 3 weeks later, a subpoena arrived at Crockett's office from an unexpected source: the House Oversight Subcommittee on Political Conduct. The signature at the bottom read, "Chairman Richard Melrose." Melrose, a seasoned political operator, had spent decades protecting his party's power structure, and he didn't appreciate what Crockett had done. "They're calling me in?" she asked, incredulous. Devin nodded grimly. "They're framing it as an inquiry into procedural overreach during the Bondi hearing." Translation: she said dryly. "They're trying to shut me up." The following week, she sat once again under the harsh glow of the committee lights, but this time, she was the one being questioned. Melrose adjusted his glasses, a smug smile curling his lips. "Congresswoman Crockett, the committee appreciates your cooperation. There have been concerns that your acquisition of evidence during the Bondi hearing may have involved improper sourcing." "Improper?" she repeated. "You mean exposing a falsified report?" "We're speaking of how that report came into your possession," he said pointedly. "An anonymous source? Possibly foreign?" "The source was anonymous," Crockett replied calmly. "But the data was verified by 2 independent federal experts. It's authentic." "That's not the issue," Melrose said. "The issue is chain of custody. Without it, the documents could be inadmissible, and your actions could constitute a breach of congressional protocol." Crockett leaned forward. "Mr. Chairman, are you investigating the lies or the person who exposed them?" The audience murmured. Melrose's gavel came down hard. "This is not a debate." "No, it's not," she agreed coolly. "It's a cover-up." Gasps erupted in the chamber. "You're attempting to discredit me because I followed the money, and it led straight to the people who fund your campaigns." Melrose's face turned red. "You are out of order." "No, Mr. Chairman," Crockett said, standing. "You are." The gavel slammed again, but it was useless. The cameras had captured every word. Within hours, social media exploded with clips of the confrontation. The hashtag Crockett vs. Melrose trended globally. Editorials praised her courage. Pundits debated her tactics. The truth, however, was more dangerous than anyone realized. Late that night, back in her office, the lights flickered. A shadow moved past the frosted glass. Devon rushed in, breathless. "We just got an alert from IT. Someone tried to breach your secure network." "From where?" "The IP traces back to a defense contractor in Virginia. Same one connected to RLI's shell accounts." Crockett exhaled slowly. "They're trying to erase the trail." She retrieved the flash drive and slipped it into a new encrypted case. "They won't succeed." By morning, the story had metastasized. The DOJ expanded its probe, now labeling it a multi-agency task force review of potential coordinated misinformation efforts targeting congressional proceedings. Bondi's name was only the first domino. The investigation began pulling others into the light. Consultants, donors, lobbyists, media executives, and one by one, they fell. 6 months later, Crockett returned to the same hearing room. The lighting was softer now, the atmosphere subdued but expectant. This time she wasn't questioning a witness. She was chairing the committee. Her opening statement was measured, deliberate. This committee was created not to pursue vengeance, but to restore trust. The truth does not depend on convenience, and justice is not selective. Today, we release our findings on the coordinated effort to manipulate congressional evidence. Reporters filled every seat. Cameras flashed. Our investigation confirms that the Republic Legal Initiative funneled millions through shell organizations to fabricate reports, bribe witnesses, and seed disinformation. These efforts were aided by public officials who have since resigned or been indicted. She paused, letting the gravity of it sink in. What happened with Pam Bondi was not an isolated deception. It was a strategy. And that strategy failed because truth, when confronted with courage, has a way of surviving. Applause erupted from the gallery. Outside the Capitol, the air was crisp. Crockett stepped into the sunlight, surrounded by reporters, but she didn't speak. Her eyes lifted toward the dome, gleaming gold under the setting sun. She thought about the anonymous whistleblower, the one who'd sent that first email. No one had ever come forward, and she suspected they never would. But their message had been clear. What she isn't telling Congress. That one sentence had set off a chain reaction that exposed an entire web of corruption. Later that evening, in the quiet of her apartment, Crockett sat by the window overlooking the Capitol. The city buzzed faintly in the distance, headlines still spinning, pundits still talking. But she allowed herself a rare moment of stillness. Her phone buzzed. A new message appeared from an unknown number. "Good work." "But they're regrouping. No signature. No metadata." Just those 5 words. Crockett stared at the message, then typed back, "So am I." She deleted the thread, turned off her phone, and looked once more toward the Capitol dome. The battle for truth was far from over. But tonight, for the first time in months, Jasmine Crockett allowed herself a smile.